I'm Michael Burkhart, and I'm the U.S. Air Force Agile Transformation Lead for GBSD. I'm an SPC, but my background's in mathematics, signal processing, algorithms, software development, electronic warfare. I've worked at the Georgia Tech Research Institute, Raytheon Missile Systems, and I currently work at the 309th Software Engineering Group in the Air Force. I've been there for 7 years, and for 4 years I've worked on GBSD. I'm originally from Atlanta, Georgia. Go Braves. And I live in Salt Lake City, Utah with my wife and our 6-year-old and 3-year-old twins. I really like life in Utah. I really like the outdoors, the accessibility of the outdoors. I'm passionate about hiking, mountain biking, and skiing. I also like cooking and eating. And I'll let Dave Gellin introduce himself.
Hey, thank you, Michael. My name is David Gellin. I've been an IT professional for over 25 plus years. I've worked at Fortune 500 companies such as IBM, General Electric, Hughes Aircraft. I also worked with Raytheon, even though we didn't know each other back then. I worked at Cisco, the Department of Energy for a while. And for the last 4 years now, I've been at Northrop Grumman. I call myself a seasoned, basically the old guy in the room, IT professional, starting my career as a software engineer and moving over to the dark side of management with experience in program and project management, financing, and helping drive IT transformations for Fortune 500 companies. At Northrop Grumman, as the Agile Transformation Lead, I have worked on the software modernization efforts, the integrated development environment, and an E2D Hawkeye program. I also represent both the Agile Community of Practice for Northrop Grumman and the Lean-Agile Center of Excellence for Northrop Grumman. I have been married to my wife, Sharon, for 25 plus years and have one daughter, Shannon, who followed me to Utah to gain access to free labor on a house she just purchased in the Salt Lake City area. Today, Michael and I are going to talk to you about the Ground Based Strategic Deterrent, known as GBSD, and how working together with SAFe as our framework has helped us on the start of our very large cyber physical defense system journey. You will learn a little bit more today about how the Air Force and Northrop Grumman has partnered together, including combining the Air Force's Agile Resource Center and Northrop Grumman's Lean-Agile Center of Excellence to handle this multi-billion-dollar acquisition with well over 10,000 plus person development of a very complex cyber physical defense system, which is going to take the United States nuclear deterrent system to replace one of the legs of the Nuclear Triad, which Michael is going to talk about next.
The Nuclear Triad, shown here, is our nuclear deterrent strategy. It's a huge component of U.S. foreign policy, and it impacts the entire world. ICBMs in the bottom left corner there, Minuteman III being replaced by GBSD, are the highly responsive aspect of that triad. They also serve as an attack sponge. If any adversary wishes to launch an attack on the United States, then the locations and number of these ICBMs are well advertised. The adversary would have to expel its entire nuclear arsenal in order to destroy them. Minuteman III is the current ICBM. It's been in operation for about 60 years. And as it's aging, the costs of maintenance are increasing. And so at this point, it's determined that the maintenance costs are going to exceed the cost for developing a new weapon system. And that's the purpose of GBSD. So the DoD has decided to replace Minuteman III to continue this ICBM mission through GBSD. The three challenges that GBSD is using as motivation to embrace a scaled agile framework is first that impending capability gap that I mentioned. This forces a time-certain delivery for GBSD. GBSD cannot be late, or it jeopardizes the country's nuclear strategy. Embracing SAFe allows us to coordinate the parallelization of activities that are traditionally executed in serial, and that buys down risk to our schedule. Just as Minuteman III was in service for 60 years, GBSD is expected to be in service for 50 years or longer. During that time, the threat space in which it operates is going to evolve rapidly. And so GBSD needs to be able to evolve to counter that threat space. To do so, GBSD is embracing systems thinking and a modular approach to allow for future development of emerging capabilities. Finally, the scale of this development effort. This development involves over 10,000 people across hundreds of companies across the entire United States. And to coordinate those efforts across disparate teams, disparate geographies, the Scaled Agile framework will help us do that.
Thank you, Michael, for talking about why we need to move to a Scaled Agile framework. And as you can imagine, during our initial implementation, even before the contract was awarded, the GBSD program, we started to work closely with the Air Force for preparation moving into the SAFe framework. We ran through what we call PI minus events, which were month-long activities, so that we can practice so that when the contract was awarded, we can actually hit the ground running. As you can imagine, with any large program such as GBSD, we were faced with some initial challenges. We weren't all completely trained in SAFe. We had to embrace the values and principles. We had to go on a field trip of actually training all our executives. So we had a values and principles exercise for our executives to understand more about it. Some of the resources that we didn't have in place initially are now in place because, as you can imagine, over time, we've gotten much, much better at moving forward. So we've actually worked together to synchronize our calendars. We are now all working on a quarterly cadence so that we can actually accomplish stuff together. We've implemented the implementation roadmap for training. So leading SAFe and training for teams and doing a PI event. We are working very closely together with both our vendors and suppliers moving forward. And again, the customer collaboration has been phenomenal because of the SAFe framework and the activities that we practice. We needed to make sure we were adapting the large solution for SAFe. As we look at the big picture here, one of our responsibilities was making sure we had our roles filled appropriately. We had all the correct people in the right place. They were trained. We were following the implementation roadmap. We were making sure we had our principles and values down. And what's important is we looked at the principles, and all of these principles are extremely important. But as a start, we looked at the highlighted ones. We started with thinking about applying system thinking, which, as Michael mentioned earlier, is so important in a evolving threat space, and technology will definitely change over the next 50 years or so. So we made sure we were applying system thinking. And this allowed us to do number 3, which is assuming variability and to preserve all our options. This was important because we know that what we start today will definitely be different, 10, 15, 20 years down the line. We went through the effort of synchronizing our calendars so that we can have our PI events, so that everyone was on the same page at the same time. And this was across the entire enterprise, including all our vendors, stakeholders, and various government agencies that are part of the GBSD program. And of course, we wanted to organize around value. We held several value stream mapping workshops. We identified some of the value streams. We did some rearranging of our teams and our arts based on our discovery of what happened during value streams.
GBSD is embracing a Lean-Agile mindset across the enterprise. That means we're not just applying it to software teams. We're not just applying it to software and hardware teams. Not even just applying it to product teams. We're applying it across the enterprise. This includes service teams like program operations and finance. All of these teams are involved on a common quarterly planning cadence and have the opportunities to collaborate and to learn to pivot as that provides. Due to COVID and geography, we've done our program planning to date virtually. This has supported enormous growth and collaboration. So we started a little over a year ago with just a handful of people in what we call prototype program increment planning events. And we just finished PI4 planning, which involved about 1,500 participants. GBSD will continue to grow. We expect it to support over 10,000 jobs across 300 subcontractors across 38 states. We also have government stakeholders involved, over 30 different government partners in 10 states and 5 operating locations. Because of this, we plan on continuing PI planning in a virtual environment with limited hybrid environments where necessary.
So part of our adoption is to have a good lean, agile DevSecOps approach. And this is what we're using for our implementation for GBSD. Again, we're leveraging this throughout the entire enterprise so that everyone's on the same page. We're using the same tool set so that we can accomplish our goal. And eventually we will put this in the Platform 1, which is a government-based cloud deployment, which again is very unique to acquisition for the government. Usually the contractor would deliver it and then hand it over to the customer. So again, this is very unique. Some of the takeaways from our DevSecOps enablers. Again, this is one of the first government-furnished pipelines in a defense acquisition. Again, we're using a common program cadence and synchronization nationwide. And again, we've established a common digital engineering environment, which facilitates collaboration between both the government and all the contractors.
We're implementing our framework across the enterprise via an agile release train structure. Within the arts, government and contractor work jointly together on project management teams to manage and prioritize backlogs. This is really unique in acquisitions, this level of government involvement in backlog prioritization to really determine the features that the contractor is going to be working on each quarter. Each ART consists of contractor development teams, but the government is still interacting with these teams through sprint reviews and demos based on where that interaction would be most beneficial. A little over a year ago, pre-contract award, we started these month-long prototype PIs, which we called PI -3, PI -2, PI -1, and PI 0. That star there, the authorization proceed, that represents the contract award. This collaboration pre-contract award is really unique. In general, interaction between the technical teams of contractor and government during an acquisition is really reserved for after the contract is awarded. Only the contracting teams have much interaction. But since we had so much to learn on adopting an agile cadence, we got special permission to start this development early with these month-long prototype program increments. Through that cadence, we were able to learn a lot of things and adapt before we rolled out our program increment cadence to the entire program post-contract award. So PI 0 was really just to get us synced to the fiscal year cadence, and the PI 1 in October of 2020 was our first full quarter program increment. We just finished PI 4 planning, and now we're currently executing program increment 4. The results that we've experienced through adopting a scaled agile framework, really the first result highlighted there is the most important. This is unprecedented communication between the prime contractor and the government acquisition program office. Typically, this soon post-contract award, government contractor is still working out what their roles are, who's doing what, who their cross-organization counterparts are, how they need to be communicating, what they need to be talking about. We're already having working groups, these large planning events. We're already having government input being solicited and given on prioritization of backlogs and identifying areas for improvement. One of the big areas we've improved is identifying a duplicate effort plan for the implementation of the DevSecOps pipeline. Both the government and the contractor were planning on doing identical work. We identified that and corrected it. Additionally, we've adopted digital tools like Jira to enable team-level ownership of the backlogs. So typically on an acquisition program, you have this thing called the Integrated Master Schedule in IMS that tells you when everything is going to be worked on and delivered, which is great from a top-down overall program management point of view, but from an engineering point of view, you don't really have much visibility into it or ownership of it. Linking that IMS to Jira has really let our engineering teams see into how the work they're doing affects the overall product. We have additional government stakeholders outside of the acquisition program office, certification authorities, test authorities, and we've already involved them in the contracts PI planning. This is a little bit about what I was saying early on in terms of parallelizing activities that have traditionally been done in serial. We're already involving those stakeholders in the program increment planning so that their concerns can be communicated and reflected in future development prioritization. And finally, we've identified risks in the original design architecture and addressed those.
So some of our key takeaways was early and continuous integration of both the software and the hardware. And not only those teams, everyone that's part of GBSD. We wanted to make sure we had continuous learning in an evolving threat space and make sure that we were able to upgrade as technology changes. So it's real important for us to embrace a SAFe framework that allows us to get that feedback early and often with all of our developers, stakeholders, and customers. So a tip going forward for everyone is lead with the SAFe principles and values as your starting point on your Agile journey. Don't forget, this is a journey. We've been doing stuff in a waterfall method, not working closely with our typical government acquisition. So this is new for us too, working collaboratively. So we're down here in our valley of despair, and we've been at this for a little bit over a year, and we're starting to climb up to the mountain relief, and we see great benefits in our approach and doing this with a scaled Agile framework implementation. On behalf of Northrop Grumman and for the Air Force, I thank you for listening to our presentation today.